if you live in Florida, you might have heard of a town called Wellborn, but did you know that this town, it was one of the first towns established in Suwannee County, and they had one of the first paved roads in that county. It was made out of brick, but if you didn't, don't worry. I did some digging. Let's get into it. Now, before I get, too deep into this, y'all already know I start this thing off with the natives, all right? So early into the 1800s, the land that Wellborn sits on today, it was called Little River, and it 100%, I'm talking about 100%, it was owned by the Seminole tribe. Now, at this time in Florida, there was a lot going on between the Seminoles and, troops coming in trying to take their land, because the first Seminole War was over around 1816, somewhere in that vicinity. But when that war was over with, it opened up the door for people to actually come in, to Florida, kind of take over the land that, they left behind. And what I mean by left behind is they were taken out by raids and massacres. Well, they just left because they didn't want to fight anymore. Now, somewhere around 1930, there was a guy by the name of George E. McClellan. He bought some land, like 560 acres in that Little River area. Remember what I said? The area was called Little River. But there was also a popular, native trail that was along this little area, and people traveled this, all the time. So there were a few people kind of scattered, in the area. But when he came into town, he pretty much created like a system, like a whole system, because people could come to his house and trade out their horse, or if they was injured between these wars that they was having with the natives, they could come in here and get rest, at his house. Now, George, soon as he, got here, he kind of wanted to, develop things, but there's a problem. They didn't get rid of all the natives. So while they were kind of building up this little area, like I said, it was already popular, he had to hire people to kind of wait out in the woods and kind of give an alert if the natives would try to ambush him or something like that. So it was kind of stressful, at first. Remember what I said, it's somewhere around 1830s. Seminoles were still around. Now, with that being said, okay, somewhere around 1840, 1841, they do get attacked. And it's bad. It's so bad that they got to call up the governor and be like, hey, look, okay, we need some help over here because we can't handle them. So what happens is that the governor does send over some help, but they send them over to this nearby fort to kind of patrol the area. And when they did that, it took a lot of the men that were helping kind of develop this area, kind of took them over to that way. Now, in 1842, the Second Seminole War had ended, but it wasn't over with, with these Seminole tribes, because also in 1842, the Seminole tribe wanted to get one more hurrah. They wanted to do one more thing before they get out of here, because one of the families here, one of the earlier settlers called the Tillis family or Tillus family, they all get taken out. It was a mother, a father, some kids, but they all get taken out. House burned down, whole nine. And when this happened, it turned really, really dark in the area, for a little bit, because they kind of felt like they couldn't get rid of the Seminoles, which they couldn't, I'm gonna be honest with you. Wellborn, y'all had to earn y'all start. Well, it was rough for y'all. Now, somewhere in the 1850s, they were building a railroad system that would connect the Jacksonville area to Tallahassee and to Pensacola and just the rest of the United States. But there was, a guy that helped put this whole thing together. This is him, I think, and I'll explain that later. But this is Louis DeBose, but his middle name is Wellborn. Now, the story on how Louis gets the land, it's a little bit weird. I don't really get it, and I don't understand it. But story number one, it was said that the land was given to him, maybe from, George, because, George had 560 acres, but they wanted to give him the land to thank him for, helping to bring the railroad into town. And the second story is that he just came into town and bought 240 acres. Simple as that, because there's a receipt for that. Now, Louis, he either purchased or was given this land in January of 1860. And as soon as he got it, he platted this bad boy out. All right. Now, I don't know if this is the, exact, schematic of Louis thing, but it kept popping up as I was doing the research. But when he, did this, as soon as he got the land, at the same time, he named the place Wellborn. Thing is, there's already a post office here called Little River. He was like, he ain't care about none of that. He just named it. This is the town of Wellborn. You're welcome. Now, when Louis, purchased this land, when he platted this thing out, he platted it out to be more of a town, all right, where it could have some stores and, things like that. So a lot of the people that were, scattered around, the area, they ended up buying more land from Lewis, including George. Because, George had the first, general store here. You come in, get you some, bleach and rope. I don't know what they were selling, back at this time. But, George was a businessman. And so was Lewis. Now, over the next 20 years in the Wellborn area, they grow. But, they kind of stagnant a little bit during the Civil War time. There was a lot going on here in this area during the Civil War. Too much to put in this video. But they kept trucking. The thing is that they had a whole community already. Like I said, they had general stores. They had churches, school. They had a billiard room, bars, saloons, which is a bar. You get what I'm saying? They were rolling good, deep by the 1880s. Now, also at this time in the Wellborn area, this community, they kind of like depended on the community. Yeah, they had a lot of, investors and people were coming through building stuff, but they really relied on like the farmers in the area because they weren't just doing citrus. They were doing all kind of stuff. Like I said, a lot of the, first history here was plantations. So cotton was still a big, thing in the area, but they survived like this for a very long time and really didn't need anybody because they just depended on each other. They were a full town before a lot of the towns actually got rolling here in Florida. Now, at this time in Wellborn, all right, there's 250 families and we haven't even, hit the turn of the century. All right. So it was said, if I read the, history correctly, that Suwannee County was actually created around Wellborn. That's why it's one of the first communities inside of Suwannee County, is because they were just highly populated. There was a lot of people in the area. Now, over in Wellborn, okay, there's a paved brick road. All right. It's about 3/4 of a mile. But this was the first paved brick road in Suwannee County, and it's one of the first paved brick roads in Florida. All right, and it covers up the Spanish Trail. I said earlier it was called the Native Trail. That was a lie, okay? It's called the Spanish Trail. Sorry about that. I'm human. I'm not perfect, even though I like to think I am. Now, if you wanted to, travel on that road, it's still, here today. If you in Wellborn, how close is this to you? Do people come here all the time to be like, oh, I'm on the first paved road? Any of that? Probably not. Also, if you've seen this house, okay, it's one of the first houses in the area. I believe this is one of George's houses. I don't know if it was the first house he had, the one that was like the little post where you can switch out your horse and get your medical help. I believe that this was that house. So if you've seen this before, put it in the comments. Also, this is one of the first auto body, shops in the area. It is said that it's still up today. So if you are, in the area of Wellborn, what is this place today? Now, real quick, because I'm running out of time, all right? There's a ton of history in this area, dating back to the Seminole Wars, to the Civil Wars, to black communities. Like, it's a lot. So if y'all see me do another, video on this area, mind your business, okay? Don't be in the comments be like, oh, you already did this area. Mind your business, because I'm doing a part 2. Now, look, I don't know what y'all gonna do to remember this. Like it, comment, share it. Please share it. Please share it. I don't know, but the more you know. Peace.